Good evening. Tonight we're going to talk about marriage and money. Now this can be a great success or it can be a toxic disaster. And I think for most of us we fall somewhere in between those two extremes. But we're very fortunate today to have an expert on the topic of finances. My name is Keila Gilbert. I'm the founder of Alpha Center for Divorce Mediation and Alpha Resource Center. We've been in business for 20 years, helping couples navigate through divorce without the added expense and stress of going to war through the courts. And we make it our business to connect with the people in the community who can be of service to our clients, because you have a lot of needs when you're going through that transition. And as I said earlier, we feel very honored today to be with Sheila Jacobs, who is an expert in financial matters. And I'm going to let her introduce herself and talk about her background before we launch into the questions.
So hello. Thanks for having me tonight. It's really a pleasure. So I'm Sheila Jacobs, as Keila said. I'm a branch supervisor and certified financial planner with Wells Fargo Advisors. Split my time between our Princeton, New Jersey and our Yardley, Pennsylvania offices. And as I said to a new client this evening, I don't often admit this anymore, but I've been serving clients in this industry for just about 20 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're very, very close in timing.
That experience counts for a lot.
Yes, it does. It's a gift to have it. Yeah.
So, marriage and money.
Yeah.
Let's start off with the ideal relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And talk to us about how you recommend finances be handled in the marriage relationship.
So we could write a whole book on that, right?
We could, but
in
we
the
only
interest
have
of
an
time.
hour. Right.
So I think ideally the best scenario, what I've seen work over these 20 years, is really when people approach this the way they would their business. I call it the family business, because that's really what it is. And it doesn't mean you can't be romantic or thoughtful and things can't be interesting, but when people make a concerted effort to balance the books, balance the budget, be mindful, have that strategic plan that maybe looks out 5 to 10 years, and then has, in our office we call it buy-in, right? But when the partners are buying into the plan and they feel like they participate and own the plan, that's the best case scenario.
Okay, so my first question is that everybody comes into a marriage with strengths and weaknesses. And oftentimes there's someone that's really good at finances and the other person who wants nothing to do with it. That doesn't set up a scenario for the kind of cooperation that you're talking about. Is that workable? How would you suggest dealing with that scenario?
So I'd suggest that people operate within their strengths. So as you point out, some of us may have more aptitude or energy or interest in learning more about personal finance, and others not. I think, though, even for those who are not interested, it's so important to be informed and at least have a high-level education and certainly specifically understand or know where the family finances stand as it relates to the plan. And those folks who, even if they don't have an aptitude for the personal finance side of it, they can embrace the vision and sort of be on board with the plan and be a partner in that sense, and delegate the day-to-day management to the person that might have it as a strength.
Okay. How would you recommend structuring that in terms of time? Are you talking about sitting down together once a week?
No, not for this.
Okay. What's the time frame for these
So this
high-level
is a good question.
exchanges?
So, at least an annual meeting. So you would have, if you were a business, right, you're going to have an annual meeting, the state of the union, if you will, right? So you would at least have that. In addition to that, when important things happen, like new babies and things like that, you're going to have another meeting because you're in transition. So anytime something significant happens, and I would even drill down a little bit farther, because so often when there is that imbalance in terms of the aptitude and interest in personal finance, it can feel like it's a maternal or paternal situation, right? So one of the things that I've recommended to couples throughout the years is to have a level of spending where we don't need to have a conversation and make that part of the plan. So depending upon your budget, if that's $100 a month or $1,000 a month or $10,000 a month, this is our level at which we don't need a conversation. We have freedom because that's within the plan.
Okay.
We go above that level, then one or the other partner asks for a meeting. Let's have a meeting. There's something I'm interested in doing. Maybe we revisit our plan. Maybe we make a decision that it's not part of our plan. But
And which brings me to the next question. Often you have your spender and you have your saver, which is another dynamic of a relationship, which is not uncommon.
Not at all.
How do you recommend dealing with that?
I think it all is alignment, right? Alignment with the plan, alignment with the vision, just being consistent in that regard. And that discipline, communication is so important. And I know, there are the cliches about hiding what you bought in the closet or the trunk or wherever and pulling it out later. But, married, we want to address this as though we are business partners because it's a contract. You know that part, right?
Yes,
People don't think about that until it's dissolving, right? But it's a legal contract, so I think you have a commitment to communicate with your partner about the more serious issues. Embracing the vision or adjusting the vision accordingly would be so important. But you have to have that candid communication. And again, for those, I'm thinking of, there was a specific couple. And we're on Facebook Live, so I'm not going to talk about who they were. But that comes to mind the first time I thought there needs to be that spending cap level. There needs to be that level where this partner can go and do his thing. He works hard. He's responsible. He can do his thing up to this level so they're not constantly at each other's throats because he spent too much on this, that, or the other. And then when we get to that level, he was comfortable with that. It was sort of liberating for him to say, okay, she's not my mom. I don't have to feel like the bad kid anymore. This is my level. I work within this. And then we have an adult conversation when I want there to be a change or she wants there to be a change.
Okay. I as you know, see them afterwards.
Yes.
Totally broken
This is a good
down.
couple. I'm really happy with the way things have worked out for them.
Okay. So let's say these, the couple, a hypothetical couple, who didn't have your good advice early on going into the marriage. They're hearing it now. There have been problems. What do you suggest for changing course? Can they do it on their own? Should they call in resources? If so, what resources would you suggest?
So the doing it on your own is not just a matter of the investment in it. It goes to trust in the relationship. It goes to not just trust in the person, but trust in how well the other partner understands the process and how well that person can get you through this period of crisis or transition or whatever you're looking at. So I would say there will always be those folks who do have the aptitude. They can stop, check, communicate, and change course. That is the exception, though, I think, rather than the rule. So, I'm always open to talking to folks who need that sort of guidance with budget and investment management, and I think a lot of financial advisors are. We can be great resources, and I think that's part of the consultation phase, where we figure out if it's a good fit. At Wells Fargo, we actually call it a fit meeting. Are we a good fit for each other? Do we have what we need? And I would say that you should interview several advisors to make sure that your personalities gel, to make sure there is a good fit, to make sure you're getting thoughtful and thorough answers to your questions. And it's okay if it's not a good fit. And then for your do-it-yourselfers, one of the things that I use a lot if I'm on LinkedIn, and I try to post pretty regularly. I put up a lot of good resources there from a lot of sources, not just Wells Fargo sources, but a lot of other sources. So certainly you can look there and on the web for other resources. And I actually use Investopedia a lot. I think it's a very user-friendly site.
No, I've not heard of that.
I like Investopedia. It's very basic, but it is a level where I think most people can jump in and sort of embrace it. And then there are all kinds of free resources on the web for you.
Yeah, I've tried mint.com.
Mm-hmm.
I found that pretty good as far as budgeting and tracking banking.
I think Mint is a good resource, but I think, so one of the things that I say when I get out and speak on this particular topic is we have so many, we can do Excel spreadsheets, we can use Mint, we can go to Investopedia, we can follow whomever on LinkedIn, right? But it really is that emotional commitment that when you got into a crisis situation, I talked about the annual meeting, but then it's more like a monthly or a bi-monthly meeting when you're in crisis might correspond to the revenue coming into the household where you have to have a conversation and really work through it. And good old-fashioned pen and paper can work. So what I say is don't let the lack of knowledge of technology or a particular website be an obstacle. Investopedia is great. Barron's also does a good dictionary for those of us who still like paper of financial and investment terms. But the bottom line is this thing works best when you don't spend more than you earn, right? It's really the fundamental, right?
Yes,
so we don't have to go anywhere to know that. Tracking your expenses, just again, you can do Excel, you can do Mint, you can do whatever you want. You can get a piece of paper and a pencil.
But
right?
You're recommending tracking.
I absolutely am, especially in times of crisis. So tracking not only gives you knowledge of what you're doing, it gives you the opportunity to view this data. I sound so clinical, right?
Yeah.
But this data in a way that you can make decisions. Are these expenditures that we want to continue to incur? Is it aligned with our vision for ourselves and our family?
And I think a lot of people just don't want to go there.
They don't want to see it.
Denial.
Don't even want to know.
Yeah. And that's a breeding ground for a lot of tension financially and in a marriage. Sometimes when people arrive at my doorstep, they one or the other has secretly opened their own bank account.
Things are hidden.
Yes. My question to you is, when you're talking about this healthy relationship in a marriage with regard to money, do you recommend that they each keep their own individual accounts and then keep a joint account?
So this is a peace of mind decision, I think. And so for the couple, they're, the people's own history of personal finance, the way they grew up, how things were in the house, so matters in this situation. So it is a very, very personal decision. It works, whatever works for you works. So if that means that one partner has responsibility for certain bills, the other bills, and they have separate accounts, and they come to the table for their meeting to balance things, that works. If people need, some people need everything to be together. We're partners, we are a team, we need to combine our assets and then have the person who's stronger be responsible for paying the bills and making sure the same. Either way works, but the key is the communication around what works. And if there's a difference there, what is the compromise? It may be a bit of both.
It sounds like honesty is a real fundamental need to make this work.
It really, really is. Candid communication and feeling like you have the space to speak up is so important. So whether you're, if you're the stronger personality, opening up and making sure that person knows that they have space to be heard, or and if you're the personality is not generally as strong, just little baby steps, consistently speaking up for what you feel comfortable with, and being willing to collaborate. This forever's a long time. These vows that we make. Yeah. And it can feel like forever if it's not working, right? So either way, it is work. It's definitely work.
Marriage is work, a successful marriage.
And in keeping with finance, it is an investment in your future. And when it's done right, it brings people closer together. That's the beauty of it. When you're communicating and collaborating, and it's for those who've been on teams. I mean, some of the best communication I had ever was with my teammates. We understood each other. We had a goal. We worked toward the goal together as a team. Okay.
And that is, of course, how we'd like to see every marriage or partnership proceed. But as we know, it doesn't happen that way. So you're recommending that when the couple finds themselves in rough waters, that they seek online resources, talk to respected, reliable financial experts like yourself, and suppose that that just doesn't work out, and they continue down a path where the marriage is beginning to break down, the financial relationship is now infused with distrust. Can you speak to how you think ideally that would be handled, and what you've seen in your practice?
Yeah, so I will stop and say the CFP Board of Standards, that's the Certified Financial Board of Standards, also is a great resource for finding certified financial planners like myself. And but I would say if you're feeling as though, you know, it's almost, again, I keep going back to this idea of the family business, right? So if you're feeling as though this is about to dissolve, I would still be in favor of communication, and that communication might look something like, it might be a good idea for us to start to think about managing these parts of our finance individually, still having your meetings, because especially when children are involved, you're intertwined forever, whether you like it or not.
Parents for life,
right?
for sure.
So having those conversations about, you know, it may start with your individual retirement accounts because they can't be joint, or your 401ks with your employer, they can't be joint accounts. So thinking about the way that you might manage those, and talking about pieces of the budget that you might each manage. Now, if you can't talk together about that, which unfortunately may be the case, then individuals, I would think, would have to start thinking about their individual budget, what they can manage on their income, and what that might look like for them if they had to do that. I think you have to start thinking about that in a situation.
What I've found in that sort of perilous part of a marriage breaking down is that the distrust shoots
peaks
straight
all of a
up,
sudden,
and that people go off to their corners and engage financial people, lawyers, to
they're ready
to protect,
building their team.
Protect their best interests, and that seems to polarize the situation even more. And what I'm hearing you say, and what has been my experience in practice, is if they don't fall off of that cliff, if they still manage to keep talking and have a neutral professional such as you steering them, it's going to be better for them.
It absolutely will be better. You know, you cannot dissolve. You know, I'm sitting here thinking of my own family, right? So I'm blessed that my husband and I, we had an anniversary recently, and somebody said, "What are you doing for your anniversary?" I said, "We're going to stay married." I feel like that is a really great gift.
That is a wonderful gift.
So, you know, in thinking about that, especially when I think about our sons, we talked a little bit about them before we went on, just thinking about them, and I think the thing that might hold families together, or at least the spouses together, at least emotionally enough to get through it, is that central theme of, okay, what are we going to do for the children? Let's start there. Let's start thinking about, we may not have a vision for each other anymore, but we may have a vision for how we want to educate our children, what we want to give them in life. So that may be the thing that can hold you together just enough to continue to communicate. Even if you don't feel like the two of you are a team, you may still be able to get through it if you think about the kids and put them first. And I know it can be tough. I'm a child of divorce.
Okay.
So I've lived through that, and that absence of communication is really almost deafening, right? It's just so loud.
Certainly from a child's perspective.
Right, and so if we can think about that.
Yeah. I think what I've found is that common sense seems to take a back burner, and the emotions take over, and then it's about so often focusing on the other person's shortcomings and you know, feeling wrong,
especially if we feel like we've been wrong.
And you know, I've seen it even exacerbated when there's another person involved in
Three
the
people in the marriage.
Yeah. And that just seems to light it on fire. And I think when people are angry and anxious and vengeful, they're not thinking clearly.
It almost feels instinctive, you know, protecting, as opposed to, you know, some people just aren't able initially to calm themselves enough to be thoughtful and proactive in a positive way because they're hurt and wounded. And you know, and I think one of the things that you do for your people is bringing counselors to the table so they can still have that communication. And I think that they probably need to do that venting and say, hey, this is how I feel. I am very angry with you right now. There is no question. I think you have to give them room to speak those words and to go through that normal cycle.
Yeah, so I think counseling is a good resource for people going through that. What I see when I think of it as their brains being on fire, and rightfully so, because this can be one of the most painful things that you can go through. But I see that when they're in that state, they're thinking about right now. They're not thinking about
long term.
You know, 6 months, a year, 5 years down the road, and you make an entirely different set of decisions when you're acting out of anger or vengeance than if you're really thoughtfully thinking ahead. So
it's a new phase. You know, I unfortunately, you know, have 2 clients going through this right now that I can think of, and you know, one, and I'm calling them a team because they are still sharing the home and they're still having conversations. In this one particular scenario, the woman just really felt that she was wronged. But she was able to remain calm. It may have something to do with the fact that she's an avid runner, and I hear there's all kinds of great things that come around when you run that many miles a day. But she's been able to remain calm and thoughtful, and I think that's an amazing, because it's got to be so hard. And then, you know, I have another team going through it where things are just not going as well. It's acrimonious, and the one partner just is not concerned about fees or expenses, you know, with regard to the legal stuff. So it's really tough. It's really tough.
When they come into our program, one of the first things we tell them is put a freeze on everything. You know, don't move any large amounts of money around. You know, you have to keep paying your bills. Don't go out and sign a lease or buy a sports car. You know, there's so many of those reactions that people have when they're leaving a marriage. And you know, that's the advice that we're giving, because we really are trying to get them to focus down the road and make sure that their life, when they get to the other end of this, is such that they have more money in their pocket, they have a better working relationship with their children, etc. Sometimes when they go off to 2 separate litigation attorneys, and there are wonderful litigation attorneys out there, and it's a very important field, but you find that they're just, it's as if gas is getting put on the fire.
You know, they've gone to battle and they're on completely opposite ends of the spectrum.
Have you seen, do you have any comparisons, people, I have them from my perspective, but have you seen your clients, maybe one set that has been cooperative and not acting out of emotions, but acting wisely with a view toward the future, versus people that have gone to war?
Yeah, sadly. I mean, so I was actually thinking there was a third couple going through this now that I'm working with. And one couple is just headed down a really destructive financial path, and I think a dangerous path for their kids. So that's very, very unfortunate.
Without divulging anything, can you just share what that might look like?
Well, what's happening for that particular couple is that, you know, average middle class family, they were fine, and they probably would continue to be fine, but they hired some high level litigators, which they felt comfortable. That can be a very expensive thing, and there just is no middle ground for them. So what has happened is most of their resources now have been expended with the litigation fees.
Okay.
So, they'll end up with maybe a little something left because the house is going to have to be sold now. But, it would be a very different scenario if there was some compromise happening in this particular couple, but one partner is not willing to give anything, and the marriage has been, it's been more than 10 years, and so that's difficult because one partner was a stay-at-home person before, and so no middle ground.
It's as though they'd rather inflict pain on the other person.
It is very much what it feels like.
Than have an eye toward the future.
At their own risk.
Yeah.
At their own risk. So
I say they end up sending their lawyers' kids to college instead of their own.
That's true.
And
and grad school.
And grad school. If they get a really powerful one.
The emotions are really strong, and it's really unfortunate. And I don't know how, except thoughtful communication or counseling, I don't know a way to right that ship.
Yeah, I think, in our practice over the years, we certainly have people that are in high conflict. They're scared, they're angry, they're hurt, but they have that common sense to know that, these decisions are going to be made. Are we going to make them sensibly and preserve our assets so we can
whatever's left in the family business, right?
Or are we going to dismantle and reorganize two separate lives, or we're going to blow it up and have nothing left at the end of it? So we get the full range, and fortunately, most of the time, we're very successful at getting their heads pointed in the right
that about you.
in the right direction, and from day one, it's what is your future going to look, and let's start making decisions to make that future a reality. The thing that I notice is that if they are working with a counselor, they're much more able to keep those difficult emotions under control. The other thing I find is that if the person is not the financially sophisticated party, not the one that's in charge of the finances, they're frightened to death.
Yeah, because that makes sense. They don't understand what's happening on many, many levels. You know?
Not only is their life changing forever, they don't know anything about money.
It's very dangerous. That's why, I said that really even those who are not as interested and don't necessarily have the aptitude need to literally come to the table at least once a year. And it's not good enough to say, you handle that, you're good at that. Because even if it's not a divorce, tomorrow's not promised. The average age of widowhood is about 59, if I'm not mistaken.
Really?
Right?
Oh,
So
my goodness.
there are all kinds of reasons, and partners can become incapacitated. There are any number of reasons why you need to come to the table, at least have an understanding. And I did something years ago. Wells Fargo has its own version of this, but I called it the love letter. And I actually got this from going back to speak at my alma mater. There were some women of wisdom in the room, and one of them mentioned that her husband, who had passed, had spent a lot of time giving her a detailed list, not just the lawyer and the accountant and the financial planner, but the plumber and who the physicians were. And I describe that as an act of love because it's so thoughtful to make sure that folks are taken care of when we can't be there to take care of them anymore. And so the love letter again was, I wrote down the plumber for my husband. That was the inspiration, right? So because he would never know where the plumber is. Now I don't know if he found. Are you watching, honey? Do you know where the plumber's name is that I wrote down? But he wouldn't know who to call, right? And so the children's doctors, things like that, just need to be chronicled as though it was your business, right?
But I see a parallel to what you're discussing. The possibility of death or the possibility of divorce.
Right.
Nobody wants to acknowledge either.
And we're going to deal with one of them.
Yes, and maybe both in most cases. So it's this unpleasant outcome
Right.
that nobody wants to plan for.
But it's part of our planning, and if we don't want to think about it for ourselves in the same way I mentioned, thinking about divorce from a children's perspective, what is our legacy for the next generation? And it's not just the money that we leave behind, it is the way that we manage the money. The numbers on the page, I think some people are turned off by talking about money. They don't want to seem materialistic. The numbers on the page represent tools for making your vision a reality, and that is, the way I view it in my practice. And so, what kinds of tools do you want to leave your children and the next generation? Not just the dollars in the account, but the way to manage not only the dollars, but the communication around those dollars.
Right.
Such a gift to be able to give folks. So.
Sometimes I've heard, and I'm interested in your opinion, that money in a marriage is a metaphor for power.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, there are, I found myself saying a lot because I have a tendency to say, I don't care, just me personally, I don't care. But then I have to go and explain that and say, I mean that in the best possible sense of those words. That I am not emotionally invested and my ego is not emotionally invested in this decision. So hopefully that gives the other person, whomever I'm talking to, the room to make the decision that is wholly theirs. And so I think that it may be difficult to give some of that power away, but I would say it's an investment in something much more important, which is the relationship and the family ultimately. If you invest in, that other person sharing knowledge and understanding, that deepens your relationship and allows you to have another tool, another strong partner. I don't think there's no downside to that.
So definitely the people that are coming through the Alpha Center 7-Step Divorce Mediation Program, when we have an imbalance of knowledge and we have one person who has no comfort level with money at all, and the other one that is highly sophisticated, we often recommend that person who needs to learn more about money consult someone like you. And as you know, you're on our resource directory for that very purpose, because we trust you. We've known you for years, and we know you to be someone who's going to look out totally for our clients' interests. Now, your profession is like my profession. There are some people out there that are more interested in their self-interest than their client's interest. And if you end up with the wrong person guiding you, it can have a disastrous outcome. So can you give our listeners some advice on how to find people like you as opposed to people who are going to be acting in their own self-interest?
They should all call me.
Well, that's a simple solution.
No, I really, I think people don't often enough trust their gut. If we are having a conversation, I think the person on the other side of that conversation can tell if they're being heard, if they're being listened to, if there is sincerity, if you're wholly invested in the conversation. And I always end a conversation where I'm the weaker person in the knowledge realm, right? With, are there any questions that I should be asking you that I'm not asking you? And I think that the answer to that tells you a lot about the person that you're talking to. And people should always ask, how does this work? Especially when you knew, how does this investment thing work? Do I just give you, I've had people say, do I make the check payable to you? No is the answer to that. Never ever, right? But so they don't understand even that. So, how do the investments happen? What is a stock? What is a bond? What are these mutual funds? How do these things work? These are questions that you should ask. Anything that you think you should know, there's no stupid question. Just no such thing. So,
but there are unsophisticated people, and I'm thinking of a horror story from years ago, where we had a couple come to us wisely to come through our program, and when they got through the program, they both had, I think, a
Similar amount,
significant amount of assets to
Mhm.
allow them to live out their lives very well. The one party was the more sophisticated and went on to continue to live a solid financial life. The other party, the unsophisticated party, stumbled into the hands of somebody who was not acting in their best interest.
Didn't work out well.
It basically emptied the bank account, and I really felt bad.
Yeah.
And we advise them, but I
Yeah.
think sometimes people are misled.
So you really, so as the investor who's not accustomed to doing this, it would be really important to me, because again, it's not as much about the dollars on the page as the vision. So the first thing I would do is make sure that advisor has a clear sense of your vision. They're really clear. Your goals and your time frames, really clear, okay? Document those conversations that you have. And then I would say that you shouldn't be participating in any investment that you don't understand clearly. There's no rush. Part of my role is to educate. And so any advisor that you talk to, I'm not really, there's nothing wrong with saying, I really don't understand this. Can you explain this further? Can you talk to me about how much this might go up or down? And that's, volatility. So we talk about volatility. A new investor is like, what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
How much will this go up and down? Will I be able to achieve my goals? In our industry, we have all sorts of tools to illustrate how those goals might be achieved and the risk that is associated with any decision that you make for investing. So ask those questions, and then certainly trust your gut. I'll repeat that again, and I would say it over and over, but we'll run out of time. But then there are also resources on our websites. We now have something called a FINRA broker check. So you can click through on the website and it talks to you about any issues that a broker has had that have been documented.
You just threw out a word that I think is important to explain so that people
So
can
I've
use
forgotten
this
what
tool.
FINRA stands for. It's Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. There's an N missing there, right? So it's so as individuals we might have or not, hopefully, a criminal record, right? So the FINRA tracks regulatory violations for people in my field. So on all of our websites, if you go to my website, there's a click through to check my record as an advisor to see if I have any complaints or anything on there. So you can certainly do that. And we live in a litigious world, so I wouldn't rule out someone just because they have a complaint. I might ask them to explain exactly what happened. I know at least one good friend of mine who had a complaint. To his credit, he saved everything, and so he had all sorts of documentation from the client, because this does work both ways, as you know, saying what a wonderful job he had done and how much they appreciated. But unfortunately, it was 2008 when the stock market was uncooperative and their children became involved and they were very unhappy. And so, something bad could have happened to him, but he had his documentation and he had done the right thing. So it does work both ways. It is another trust relationship. And until you fully understand any investment or any course of action, you should put the brakes on it.
Okay. That's great advice, and I believe that people can, with the help of someone like you, that really focuses on educating as opposed to just leading them blindly.
That's not as much fun.
Yeah, well, it's certainly not
fun
good
to
for
see
the
people
client.
along.
And I think our resource directory, which is available on alpharesourcecenter.com, where you're listed, and there are some other financial people listed. This is a list that we've, as I said before, we've vetted. There are also therapists on there who are very helpful in helping people control those difficult emotions so that they can make better decisions.
That's very
They douse the fire in the brain so that they start thinking about the future instead of the past, and vengeance and all of those negative influences. So I think that's a good place to start, and I hear you say that check through FINRA. You can always Google, talk to friends. But at the end of the day, understand, and it's not beyond your understanding. It may be something you're not familiar with,
Right.
but it's not rocket science, and that you can, with the right person leading you can learn these things and manage them and have confidence in yourself moving forward.
And the fundamentals don't change, right?
Probably never
spend
have.
less than you earn. Make sure that your investments are aligned with your goals and your time frame, and have a real clear understanding of whatever direction you're taking.
Okay. Next topic is one of my favorites to talk to you about, and we've been talking about people going through divorce. For us at Alpha Center, the children are most important, because this experience can make or break them. How their parents handle their divorce is how the children handle it. True. And it resounds for years forward.
I know that personally.
You do, because you've been through it. So I want to talk about kids and finances. Obviously, if from my perspective, if children see their parents going through a program such as ours, where there's a therapist mediator helping them focus on the needs of the children, and it's cooperative and sensible, that's a good example for them in terms of handling conflict in their life, in terms of establishing a positive parenting relationship. Tell us about money and the money lessons the kids learn from their parents.
Yeah. It's so deep because it's emotional first. I think it's first because we are emotional spenders. We can be emotional savers. And we continue those patterns. And I do nutty things like, so this personal finance is a day-to-day thing. So when I say I do nutty things, like when I'm in the grocery store, I stop and talk to my children about the cost of items, but not just the cost of items, but the price per unit. If you look really closely, that's there on the shelf. So is this really more or less expensive? Let's talk about the price per unit. I go deeper to talk about, I actually am not one to give my children money. They earn money at my house. So how long it would take them to earn the dollars for whatever it is that they're asking for.
So you're talking about teaching them financial literacy
all day, every day.
At what age would you recommend starting?
And the first time you take them to the grocery store, they can understand, because that's where I don't know all about marketing and groceries, but things are strategically positioned right at children's eye level. So we talk about those things constantly. My son my 10-year-old is even, okay, this is not Amazon Prime, so this is going to cost more for shipping. I'm like, and you don't have enough to cover that, right? So we talk about it at every opportunity. There's, again, it's a tool. And what I'm trying to do is sharpen this saw. What I tell my sons is my job is to teach you to live without me. And so you may, and again, I'm going to say I don't care, right? They may think that I'm just being strict, but I don't care because that's not my job to be their friend. My job is to teach them. So we do work through expenses and costs, and we have these conversations. We don't necessarily talk about our income as a household, but we talk about the cost of homes like ours and neighborhoods like ours. And anything that is involved in daily living. We talked before, my 10-year-old is a big guy. He's 5'2". His shoe size is 11 wide. Hopefully he's not watching either. So, but that's a man shoe. So now I think you're in the man shoe department. You're not going to have as many shoes as your brother who's in the kids shoe department, right? So,
so do you recommend then having financial responsibility for buying those things, or how do you draw the line in teaching them financial responsibility without overly burdening them?
I do recommend having that responsibility, and I think you have to gauge the aptitude of the child. when are they ready for that responsibility. And for my two sons, the timing will be very different. I can see, I have the spender and the saver. I can see it clear as day already. But certainly for extras, they are responsible for extras. We do Christmas. Santa handles that right now in my house, right? But any extras, my son loves his Legos. So he buys his Legos. We don't do that. It's, birthdays and Christmas, we do those things. But we don't do those things otherwise. And we're mindful of spending, and they're part of that process. And if they want new toys, we are not opposed to saying, okay, well, we can sell or donate some of these toys before you get new toys. We'll use the proceeds or the tax deduction toward the new toy. I have no problem with that at all.
That is such a gift that you're giving children because it's not common. Like, do you have any idea if you're an outlier? Are there other parents?
I'm probably an outlier.
Okay.
I know I did, so I'll tell you what my mother did growing up, which was sort of a gift to me, and I was very angry at the time. I worked from age 14, which was necessary because, as we discussed, my parents divorced, and my mother was a student and had a part-time job. And to my mom's credit, she started college before I was born and got her PhD the year after I got my undergrad.
Wonderful.
So she never gave up. But when I was working, she saw that I was spending every dime. And so she started to charge me rent. Now, I don't charge my children rent, but I might.
It was a good exercise for you.
So she started to charge me rent, and at some point, and then she took my bank account away. And so I was just livid. She gave me back then it was a passbook with the rent money in it when it got to $1,000, and that demonstrated the value of saving. And even when I got older and when I was living on my own initially and there just weren't as many resources, I've always been a systematic saver. And that is the other thing that my children do. For every dollar they have to save 10%. And although I don't ask this of them, we talked about my nonprofit work earlier, I'm thrilled to say one of them, when my older son, has already made his first philanthropic donation.
Wow.
So
what a great role model that children have.
It was kind of the best day so far.
I want you, before we go, because we're running a little late, I want you to plug your children's books.
Well, so I have to say they're not a Wells Fargo project. So it's very with Wells Fargo. I wrote a few books for children on saving and sharing, and they give me great pride. And my sons inspired them because they want everything just like everybody else's kids. So they really were a blessing, and I love to get out and read them to kids. So that's great fun.
And so we're going full circle here. We have these children now that are being raised to be financially literate, financially responsible. When they get into a marriage, then it's, I think, less likely that finances are going to be
Hopefully
an issue.
they'll take me on and I'll be there. They'll be my clients.
Well, I'm sure they wouldn't dare go anywhere else.
Let's hope that I can continue to give them that guidance.
But I think when I'm looking at the people I'm dealing with, that it's very clear that financial literacy was not part of their upbringing. I think very few people are as wise as you are, but I certainly would, I applaud your efforts to get that message out there, because I think it really, it has long-term benefits for kids who become adults, who become couples in a marriage.
It really is so powerful to be able to manage that tool. Just one more tool that we can manage. And we at Wells Fargo, we do a lot of education beyond our clients. So if folks want to reach out, if they need me to come to speak to a children's group or an adult group, Just on financial literacy, it's so important. We have great resources, whether they're budgeting tools as well. People can email. I'm easily found on Google. I cannot hide. If you Google Sheila Jacobs and Wells Fargo Advisors, a much better photo than this comes up, but it's probably me. So reach out.
I just want to say, Sheila Jacobs, you are continue to inspire me,
thank
and
you, Keila.
I'm
It's a joy.
so grateful that you're on our resource directory and meaningful part of our mission to help people.
Thank you.
First of all, stay married if they can.
Well, that's your anniversary gift.
But if they have to go through divorce, to do it in a way that's sensible in terms of the financial outcome, the emotional outcome, the impact on the children. So I think we'll continue to collaborate
I
and
look forward to it.
Share clients and just make the world a better place, right?
One household at a time.
All right. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you, Keila.